Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another card video at my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm going to be walking you through a very easy and simple DIY watercolor thank you card. I'm going to be making two of them. So I have two pieces of watercolor paper here, as well as a gray marker to write on my thank you greeting. I have a paintbrush here. This is a size 8 round watercolor brush. You don't have to have that watercolor brush, but I wanted to use it on this card because I'm going to be painting some large backgrounds, and it's just a little bit easier than using the small paintbrush that comes in my Crayola watercolor set. So you'll need an inexpensive watercolor set, and then I have some blue tape here that is extremely optional. In fact, I only used it so that you guys would be able to see where the card was folded on camera. So the first thing you're going to do is make your cards. So you're going to fold down your watercolor cardstock or watercolor paper. This paper I'm using today is from Canson. This is the Canson XL watercolor paper. It's actually available in many places. You can get it online, or I've heard from many of you that you've seen it at your local Walmart. So it might be in local art stores or even grocery stores or things like that. So the watercolor paper was cut to 10 inches tall by 3.5 wide, and then I just folded that down. I'm going to open these cards up flat while I paint, and because of that, like I said before, I'm just going to put on some blue tape here so you guys are able to see where the top of the card is a little bit better. So the main technique with this set of cards, it's all about mixing your colors. And one of my biggest tips that I can give to you if you want to make your inexpensive watercolor set look like $1,000,000 is to pre-mix your colors and make your own custom blends. So I'm going to be blending together some blue and green, and I'm going to be creating 4 different custom colors. And I want the very last color that I create to be very watered down. This is going to be sort of a watercolor ombre look. It's going to be a very smooth transition. And just to make it easier on yourself, you want to pre-mix your colors. As you paint this watercolor background, you're going to be working fairly quickly, so you're not going to have a whole lot of time to pick new colors and things like that. So just do a little pre-planning and you should be just fine. Starting with the most dark or intense color, which really isn't that dark or intense, especially since there's lots of water. You really want to make sure that you have a nice consistency with your paints. You don't want it too wet and you don't want it too dry. You want it just wet enough that it's not going to leave brush strokes on your watercolor paper. So in this case, it's a little bit more watery, but not too bad. So I'm starting out with that darkest shade, then I'm going to bring in the second one and I'm going to overlap those colors a little bit and then start pulling it farther down the piece of watercolor paper. I'm going to do this a couple times with that color just to bring on more of that color because I want that pure color to be at the very bottom of this painted area. You want to make sure that this stays wet the entire time. So if you need to, you can kind of move your paintbrush back up to the very top to help blend those colors. Like I'm doing here. I'm really pulling that blue quite up, pulling it up quite a ways so that it mixes those two colors. I'm going to add more of that blue. And then as I pull this down toward the bottom, I want it to get lighter and lighter. So I'm using this very last blue shade, which has a lot of water in it. I want it to be very diluted. And now I'm not even going back to the palette. I'm just picking up water out of my clean water bucket. I just wanted to kind of fade out to a clear color. So here at the end, I just went over all those areas to get rid of some of the streakiness. And then I set it aside to dry. It's going to look a little funny for now and the paper is going to be curled, but as it dries, the paper will flatten out and those colors will really blend and mix well together. For this other card, I'm going to do kind of the same idea with an ombre of colors. I'm using purples, blues, and reds for this one. And I'm pre-mixing those colors like I did before. And the thing you want to remember with this one is that we're not going for really smooth transition like we did for the first card. In this case, we want those brush strokes to show. It's going to be more stripy. So you'll notice that as I paint, I'm not adding more color to the brush. I'm letting those dry paintbrush strokes show. And I'm also adding in a little bit of black to get more intensity at the very top. So I'm going to move on to the purple shade. And I didn't actually mix any colors into this purple. I used it straight from the palette, But as I start kind of going over the color that's above, and then as I add more colors below, that pure purple shade will sort of blend into the background, and you probably want to be able to tell that it was a pure shade. So I'm adding more of those brush strokes on. And like I did with the previous card, as I near the bottom of the card, I'm going to use a more diluted paint. I want a little more water involved. So I went over this whole card quite a few times, trying to get those colors to blend a little bit more. I think if I was to do this card again, I would have stopped right here and just let it dry, and then added more colors on top later if I needed to. But while I was doing this card, I was getting a little fussy with it and kept going over those areas. So don't be alarmed if you find yourself doing the same. If you're like, this isn't looking quite right, and you keep working at it. For the most part, this is a pretty forgiving pattern or background for your watercolor painting. So if you need to kind of fuss with it, you can. I'm going to speeding up this video so that you can see the entire process and see where I really started fussing over all of this. But for the most part, it was pretty simple. I used all those colors, the same four that I mixed, added in a little blue there at the end. But for the most part, I used the same colors I had pre-blended. So in the first card, we did a really smoothly blended ombre. And then for this one, we're using more of a drier brush stroke. And we're letting it get a little bit more streaky and have some stripes show. So just a different look for this one. So after those two cards had dried completely, and I just let them air dry for, about 10 or 15 minutes and they were dry, I then took a pencil and drew on the thanks and thank you on both of these cards. You can go ahead and take your time with this, like I'm going to rearrange some things and just trying to get it to the way I want it. But don't be afraid to use your own handwriting. I think it's really special when you give someone a card that has your own handwriting on it. Even if you don't think your handwriting is the best, it's still a very personal touch. And I think it's a great way to do your own DIY card and do it completely on your own. I think it's really cool. So I'm using a gray Tombow marker. You could use a black pen for this if you wanted to, actually. I just wanted a little bit of a more toned color, so I'm using this gray. And I went over my entire cursive lines, and now I'm going in and adding some thicks and thins. So I'm adding the thicker areas to where you would have the downstrokes. So when you're drawing down on the letter, that's where I'm adding those thicker areas. This is also kind of a faux calligraphy technique where if you don't have a brush tip marker or anything like that, you can just kind of fake it until it looks like a more brush lettering style. For this other card, I'm going to do just a really simple thank you in cap letters, and I'm penciling on all of those letters and hoping that it stays pretty much in the center of the card. If it's not centered for you, feel free to erase and start over again. That's why we're doing it in pencil, so that if you have any mistakes or you're not liking how it looks, you can erase it and start over. So I'm going over that with my gray pen, my gray marker, and just a single line stroke. And you can leave it like that. But I decided to turn my marker over to where there's that brush tip. And I'm using the brush tip to add a little bit of a thicker stroke onto some areas on the letters. And once again, I'm using the, as you're writing the letters, the down strokes. So anywhere where your pen would be in a downward motion, I'm adding a thicker line. So those are the two cards for today. I'm going to use my marker to crease down those folds to make sure they're nice and flat. And if you wanted to, you could add some glitter or anything like this to these cards. These are really simple cards. All I had to do to finish off was just erase any remaining pencil lines. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you'd like to see more of these DIY videos, click on any of the videos that are up in the info card above. Thanks for watching.